the chat pod so far.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right.
Okay, this presentation is about a tool. Okay, a tool to help citizens understand the concept of kind of growth efficiency. I've never really seen anybody try to map this before, but here's an example of what's been done, and also it was done in Williams, in the Williams County Comprehensive Plan as well. Okay, but you know, the idea of how do you know if things are getting better or not? You know, how do you know good when you see it? Well, the biggest innovation that's occurred in the last 20 years are these benchmarks. I mean, we think of them as teacher-student ratios or hospital beds and so on, but there's many different ways. Measurable performance standards are often, how it's characterized. That are our policies working or are they not working? Okay, they can be simple or complicated. It can be miles of sidewalk and trails if more hiking opportunities, or traffic counts downtown if you want more traffic, or simply quantifying wetlands and floodplains and emergency response and so on, as you've seen from some of those others. This notion of community indicators, level of service, is something that I'd like to talk about here today. This whole overlay kind of thing kind of goes back to, Ian McCarg, and I'm sure a lot of you planners out there know about the Scotchman, the chain smoker, Scotch drinker that kind of ushered in the environmental movement of the 70s with his book, Design with Nature, and it was about overlapping various themes of them, isolating them and overlapping them, and additively showing landscape sensitivity. They were really environmental things like steep slopes and soils and floodplains and so on that cumulatively began to show the most sensitive places, and then on the reverse side, it was, developable places, I guess. But mostly it's saying where not to build, which begs the question, where to build, okay? And that's what we're trying to get at with some of this landscape or this growth efficiency. So McCargian is how we did in Williams County, the landscape sensitivity, but this growth efficiency one takes a little bit different wrinkle. It's very much like it, except that don't try to read this. This is from a white paper. You can please solicit for me on it. But you can see here public facilities. It's where all the schools, elementary, high school, middle schools, colleges, as well as police and fire, and all of these public facilities, be it public buildings and post offices, libraries, and so on, as well as highways and paved roads and those kinds of things, were all measured. We know where they are, and then we also know where citizens live. It's a little bit hard to see here, but all these blue and black dots are, residential address files. Okay, so we know right where people live. With those two things, computer models can begin to quantify what the average citizen's proximity is to all of these things, highways and elementary schools and so on. So literally, this map here, it's combined, it's really decimal feet right off the edge of the map in terms of how close any place in the county is to, in this case, elementary schools. And you can see 2.6 miles is what the average citizen's proximity is to an elementary school. So you might call that the norm, okay? And you can then, use this proximity and others, and proximity is relevant because in the case of, response time for police and fire, it can be translated into, or walkability, be it, schools and other services, or even linear extensions of sewer and road. Those kinds of things can all precipitate from that. You can see here how that 2.6 miles becomes a radius that can be identified. And I can assign the number 1 to those and 0 to everything else. And you can begin to cross tabs. Literally 83% of all the citizens in the county are within that 2.6 mile radius. And you can see who's well served and who's not well served. Okay? You can do this with each and every one of those. So you have these service radiuses based on the level of service norm that you can then add together to create this map that begins to characterize, the most suitable places. And it's a fiduciary obligation of local government to grow logically and efficiently. You can see these 14s then are really 14 overlapping radiuses someplace in downtown Williston, okay, where they have absolutely, perfect proximity to all of those services that were tested. okay? But you can see it just says that they're all equal. They're all just ones. Clearly there's not a lot of developable land in some of those areas as well. So you still have to, look at sort of where available land is and so on. And landscape sensitivity too. But you can see that this growth efficiency map then goes from 1 to 14. And so you weight them. I mean, literally you recall from that we had citizens weight how important they thought each of these were, where it wasn't important to be close to an airport, but it was good to be close to an elementary school and so on. So there's a weighting factor someplace between 1 and 5 that is multiplied, times that 1, so that you end up getting, not 14, but, a big number. This is arguably more defensible, okay, because it's not saying they're all equal, and you're using, citizen values to project them. We used that when we played the chip game. It informed where people placed their chips, and there's a lot of landscape sensitivity and growth efficiency as part of this. You might remember we talked about how both of these were linked to, century code, lessening of community expenditures and conserving and developing natural resources, okay? So it was important for that. There's been great public support for those maps all the way along. We used that to, direct where citizens thought appropriate places were, and ultimately created this plan from citizen input that was sort of codified in this, kind of growth framework plan, part of the comprehensive plan. But even after the comp plan was done, there's opportunities to use these maps again, sort of as for long range kind of decision making, okay? And here's an example. It actually uses landscape sensitivity, but the same thing applies to that growth efficiency map, where you have a parcel. Now this is live interactive, where you can test which levels of service are present or not, or which landscape sensitivities are present or not. And as you move from one place to another, it automatically quantifies what those implications are for kind of planning on the fly, okay? Here is an example from June 12th, 2012, where there was 10 different applications before the Board of County Commissioners. Some of them were zone changes and some of them were conditional use permits and so on, but literally isolated are the individual parcels that they're talking about, and how big is it, and what the efficiency score is, and the landscape sensitivity, and close proximity to other development, and emergency response, and those other benchmarks that we had talked about. So you can see, for example, number 7 is very green, number 5 is very red, and literally here's all 10 of those things in terms of how well they did. Here's number 7 and here's number 5. They did very well. So it's kind of decision support information. It should not be used in the deterministic fashion, but here's all 10 of those for each and every one of those things that you can begin to put together. Now here's the first one they entertained that evening for approval or denial. If I clip out here to number 5, you can see, really roads, I think. Highway proximity was the only thing, that red area was sort of, above level of service for, whereas this 7 near the edge of town is basically has lots and lots and lots of overlapping. It's a better place, more consistent with the goals of the comp plan to approve a development like that, okay? So, demonstrated support for these two projects, how they inform, first of all, the comp plan to make it better, how they inform day-to-day decision-making sort of on the fly, and how they can become sort of a vision keeper notion, the values of the citizens imposed on incremental decision-making, over time as decisions are being made. Okay? With that, I think I'll stop.
Great stuff, Steve. Thank you for sharing that. A very analytic approach, I think, that shows how we can use a data-driven analysis to help inform the decision-making process. I'm going to